Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to one of Naseej Academy's webinar series that aim to share knowledge, ideas, and reflections on topics of interest, new trends, and rapid technology. In the field of learning, knowledge management, digital transformation, libraries, and cultural institutions. Once we're talking about cultural institutions, let me tell you that our webinar tonight will be around this organization or entities. Our webinar today is about AI and cultural heritage with the title, What Makes AI Invisible? Cultural Heritage in an Algorithmic Environment. In this context, let me share with you first my reflection on the momentum of AI. I believe that our eagerness to equip artificial intelligence with human-like skills has led to the creation of new intelligences that are added to the human mind, and which the artificial intelligence then learns as a consequence. Thus, the intelligence then learns as a consequence. Thus, the processes will be in two directions, each feed the other. Based on that, when we talk about artificial intelligence and culture, the conversation often jumps straight to a big question. Will AI replace curator, archivists, historians? But this webinar begins from different point of view. The most important of AI, I guess, in cultural heritage is not as a replacement. It is environmental. It helps to reshaping how things are ordered, encountered, described, interpreted, and ultimately understood. And this is the core of the concept invisible. In this webinar, we will explore how AI affects the cultural conditions in which heritage lives. In other words, this webinar is not an argument against AI, but a way of looking closely at what AI does well in cultural heritage work, where it clearly supports access, analyzes, and care, and where its use can be both practical and responsible. To talk about this indeed, I am delighted to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Maria Mazzenga, the Assistant Professor at the Development of Information Science at Catholic University of America. She has 2 decades of experience as an archivist and curator, teaches graduate courses on digital libraries, cultural heritage institutions, and public programming in LMAs. Currently, she's directing a Catholic National Archives directory project and have many researches and paper in the field, and for sure, and books as well. And before I handed the stage to Maria, I would be glad to introduce another honor guest, which is Sue, and I will let her, because she's at the same time in the Académia, and I will give her the hand to introduce herself and also prepare the starting of this webinar to Maria. Please, Sue, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to be with Dr. Maria Mazzenga to talk about this exciting topic. I am an associate professor at the Department of Information Sciences at the Catholic University of America. So I am Dr. Mazzenga's colleague. So I have a deep interest in how AI can influence librarianship. So this will be an interesting discussion. Welcome everyone, and I look forward to a very engaged discussion.
Thank you so much, Sue, and I'm glad that, because I'm sure that you'll spice up the discussion after Maria finished with her presentation, and for sure we invited all the attendees to write their question and queries in the box of question and answer, and for sure we will share it with Maria and for you, Sue, as well, to discuss about it. Please go ahead, Maria. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Professor Abdullah Medawali. Thank you, Dr. Sin. And thank you, Mr. Saeed Ali Saeed, for assisting with the technicalities of this presentation. I'm so happy to be presenting to the Naseej Academy. And thank you for being here for this talk. So what I'd like to talk about is a reframing of the AI challenge, not about job replacement, but about invisible environmental change. I will cover 6 different hidden effects: the flattening of arrangement, displacement of encounter, valorization of the describable, homogenization of interpretation, simulation of wisdom, and disembodiment of heritage. And I'll talk about what AI does well for cultural heritage work, because this is not an argument against AI. It's just a way of looking at it in a way that we incorporate what might be being replaced into possible future solutions. So I'm going to be talking about what AI cannot do: preserving, witnessing, meaning making, and embodied connection. So, of course, as we know now, AI is transforming cultural heritage institutions with really remarkable speed. It can now transcribe hidden manuscripts. It can generate metadata for uncatalogued collections. It can answer reference questions. It can translate finding aids across languages. And it can surface connections among millions of digitized documents, vastly improving discovery of those objects, right? So the practical benefits of AI and digitization are real, and they're significant. Institutions with vast backlogs and limited staff can really quite suddenly make hidden collections discoverable. Researchers can find in seconds what once really required months to find. So these are the visible effects, the outputs, the measurable improvements in access and efficiency. But there's another set of effects that do deserve our attention, I believe. The changes AI brings that we may not notice precisely because they happen around us and not in front of us. And media theorist Marshall McLuhan observed that human beings are generally unaware of the environments in which they live. Rather, it is content that compels us. The search result, the transcription, the chatbot answer, right? Nonetheless, Ms. McLuhan's great insight, he observed it is the medium that delivers it that restructures our perception, our practices, and our sense of what matters. As he put it, we don't know who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't a fish, right? So here I attempt to name some of what may be becoming invisible as AI becomes the environmental ground of cultural heritage work over the next years and even decades. And again, the goal is not to reject AI, as the practical benefits are so significant, but just to see it clearly enough so that we can use it wisely. So what follows are 6 effects that may be reshaping our institutions in ways that we have not fully perceived. So effect number 1, the flattening of arrangement into access. So archives have always derived meaning from arrangement, right? We know of the principle of provenance that holds that records must be understood in relation to their origin. Who created those records? For what purpose? In what organizational context? And we know the concept of original order as archivists. Original order preserves the relationships among documents as evidence of how they were used. An archive is not a collection of items, but a structured whole in which position and relation carry significance and meaning, right? So AI-powered discovery systems excel at surfacing items. So a user searches for a name, a date, a subject. The system returns almost miraculously, matching documents from across collections institutions, and even continents, right? And this is genuinely powerful. But note what happens to arrangement. An object's containment may persist as a tag, right? Collection series folder, right? What disappears is proximity, right? The neighboring records that reveal pattern and trajectory of the item. So the user receives documents. The archival context through which those documents signify more than themselves tends to become optional, supplementary, and ultimately ignorable, right? The query structures the encounter. I want X, I get X. But archives have always been about what you find on the way to X, right? The adjacent folder, the unexpected series, the context that reframes the question that you thought you were asking. We all know this, having worked in archives and with these materials. The objects around the one that you're looking for can often be very revealing. So when retrieval becomes instantaneous and targeted, serendipity, I'm going to call this serendipity, does not merely decrease, the conditions for it disappear, right? Serendipity is part of the archival research process. So users don't know what they are not encountering, right? Because the environment has made it structurally absent. As far as an example, many of you are familiar with Transcribus, perhaps. European researchers used Transcribus, which is an AI-powered platform for text recognition, especially handwritten text recognition. And it was developed with Horizon 2020 funding in Europe. And they used it to identify Lope de Vega as the author of La Francesca Laura, a theater play whose authorship was previously unknown. So the platform can transcribe and search historical documents from any place, time, and language, making it a genuinely powerful tool for discovery. Yet note how the system surfaces the authorship finding while the archival context recedes. The arrangement that would show what manuscripts sat alongside this one, the provenance that would reveal how it was preserved and transmitted recedes, right? So that's one aspect of the invisibility effect that I want to talk about. Second is the displacement of encounter by retrieval. So cultural heritage has traditionally required presence, right? You traveled to the archive, you traveled to the museum, you traveled to the historic site, you stood before the object, right? Time passed, not as inefficiency, but as formation, right? I'm going to use the word formation here. The encounter was embodied, if you will. You inhabited the same space as the artifact, handled the document, or watched the curator or archivist handle the document. Experienced the silence of the reading room, right? This was not merely romantic, and I don't think I'm being nostalgic here. It was pedagogical, right? Heritage institutions form visitors and researchers through the discipline of presence, if you will. So AI enables retrieval from anywhere instantly, and the digitized manuscript or page appears on my screen in one country as readily as in another. The AI assistant summarizes its contents, suggests related materials, generates a transcription, and I have there accessed heritage without encountering it, right? What disappears is, I'm going to call this friction. Friction disappears. What friction was doing perhaps work that we may not have recognized, right? The time spent traveling, waiting, navigating was also time spent preparing, anticipating, and shifting into a different mode of attention, which was part of the encounter, right? The difficulty of access was an implicit pedagogy. And this matters because it requires effort, and this will not yield meaning to haste, right? So when AI removes friction, it may be also removing formation. Users receive information efficiently, but it does remove the formation. So whether they're being formed into the kind of people who can receive heritage as heritage, who can encounter the past, rather than merely retrieving data about it, is another question, one that the environment makes it difficult to ask. At the Pinacoteca de Sao Paulo, IBM created something called the Voice of Art. This was an AI-powered assistant that allows visitors to interact with paintings and sculptures using natural language processing. You may have heard of this. So visitors there can ask questions through headsets, and Watson answers in real time, ranging from historical facts to relationships between works and contemporary life. Now, the goal was to get more people into the museum, and it worked. The increase was about 200% to the museum, and you saw this genuine enhancement of accessibility. Yet, the friction of standing before a work in silence, of allowing meaning to emerge slowly, of encountering what one did not know to ask about, these formative aspects of the museum experience are restructured around this query response model, right? So the effect is that the environment teaches visitors that heritage yields its meaning to questions rather than to patience. So I'm advocating for keeping the pedagogy of friction alive, even as these wonderful new developments take place. So now on to the next category, which is the valorization of the describable. So AI operates on, of course, what can be represented as data, text that can be transcribed, images that can be tagged, relationships that can be structured as metadata. It works extraordinarily well on these materials, but cultural heritage, as you know, often includes much that resists description, right? Consider the aura of an original document, and I'm using aura in Walter Benjamin's sense that he describes in his essay on representation of art in a mechanical sense, and his discussion of losing aura through reproduction. So aura gives the quality of presence that a reproduction cannot. And I ask you just to simply consider the weight of a medieval manuscript, the smell of an old book, the silence of a sacred space, right? These things have aura. And consider the way significance sometimes adheres to what is not recorded, right? The gaps visible only in physical encounter with a collection. The silences an archivist can name, but no metadata field can capture. The patterns of absence that emerge only through comparative experience across repositories, right? The absence of a file that you thought was there, or a gap in a collection. That's information, right? So these aren't incidental, I'm going to argue, to heritage. They're often where meaning lives. So when AI becomes the primary access layer, the describable is not merely a privilege. The undescribable becomes structurally invisible, right? So the system can't surface what it cannot represent. Users searching through AI-mediated interfaces encounter what has been tagged, transcribed, and linked. What has not been, and maybe what perhaps cannot be, does not appear. It does not register as absent because its absence leaves no trace. The environment selects for the describable without announcing that selection, right? So a couple of examples here that you're all probably familiar with. So wonderfully, AI technologies enabled the reconstruction of the missing portion of Rembrandt's The Night Watch, which had been cut from the bottom and left sides of the work. Now, the restored work is wonderfully now exhibited at the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands. AI also helped complete Beethoven's unfinished 10th Symphony, right? Both achievements are remarkable, of course. Both required extensive expert input to succeed. Of course, this wasn't done just exclusively by AI. As the European Parliament's Research Service emphasizes, quote, AI needs an expert input by researchers to succeed, as it is an important tool, but the human factor is also essential, right? But what cannot be reconstructed is the aura of the original creative art, the original creative act, the indescribable quality of presence that Benjamin identified, Walter Benjamin. So the AI produces stylistically coherent reconstructions, but what it can't do is, we just need to remember, is produce the original creative act, or the actual choices Rembrandt or Beethoven would have made in that unrepeatable moment, right? We just need to note that plausibility is not presence. The next thing I'd like to emphasize is the homogenization of interpretation. So AI models are, of course, trained on existing data, existing scholarship, existing metadata, and existing descriptive frameworks. We know this, but I want to put a slightly different spin on it. They learn what has been said and generate more of it. Large language models, in particular, tend toward consensus. They produce the statistically probable response, the interpretation that fits the pattern of prior interpretations, right? But heritage is often most significant where it challenges consensus. So marginalized communities preserve what dominant cultures ignore or suppress. We have archival silences, the gaps in the record that testify to power relations that shaped what was kept and what was destroyed. Dissonant interpretations, minority perspectives, and counter-narratives are precisely what a consensus-generating system will tend to suppress, not through malice, but just through structure, right? So the model reflects its training data. The training data reflects existing power arrangements. The output reproduces those arrangements while appearing neutral. As has been observed, bias is inherent in cultural heritage collections, and their digital versions and AI pipelines may amplify bias. So this bias is not merely a technical flaw to be corrected. It reflects historical reality, right? That all collections involve bias exists prior to any sampling. Unbiased data, even as an idea, is essentially ahistorical data. So the digital transfer of collections then entails issues of digital cultural colonialism and otherness, reflecting tensions between contrasting structures, such as European and Western versus other, North versus South, center versus periphery. And when AI assists discovery and contextualizes documents or generates interpretive summaries, it draws on this trained consensus. And I'm drawing here on the work of Foka and Griffin, 2024, analyzing cultural bias in European collections specifically. So users receive interpretations that fit established patterns. So the heterodox, the marginal, the dissonant, unless explicitly tagged and surfaced, they tend to recede from view. The environment produces the expected and buries the surprising, all while presenting itself as comprehensive, a thing we need to look out for. And here I will bring up Leiden University's archaeological detection project. And again, I'm referencing the Foka and Griffin article. I can send that to anyone that's interested. So this Leiden University project, they produced an archaeological detection project which combined LiDAR data with deep learning to identify sites in Dutch forests. And this Heritage Quest project engaged over 6,500 citizens, citizen science volunteers, discovering that areas were under intensive cultivation 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. And this changed the understanding of local history. Now, this demonstrates AI's power to surface what was hidden, yet the training data determines what can be found, right? The system successfully detected barrows and Celtic fields, but it couldn't detect existing charcoal kilns, right? Because there was no training data for them. The scientists knew that the charcoal kilns were there, and these were kilns where they created charcoal, which is a slow burning, a slow burning object that's used for various purposes, from heating to forging different elements. And the scientists knew that the charcoal kilns were there, but the LiDAR couldn't detect it, right? So there was no training data for that. So the algorithm finds what it has been trained to recognize, and what lies outside its training data remains structurally invisible, is what I'm pointing out here. Okay. Then I wanted to mention the simulation of wisdom. So cultural heritage institutions have always provided more than information. We know that, right? They have offered wisdom, the capacity to interpret significance, to connect past and present, to help users understand not just what happened, but what it means, right? The wisdom is embodied in curators. It's embodied in archivists, librarians, educators who have spent years developing judgment, contextual knowledge, and interpretive skill. And I'm drawing here on the work of Lance Straight. I highly recommend his 2024 article on the future of knowledge and the fate of wisdom in the age of information. So I'm drawing from him here. Wisdom can't be reduced to data, right? He makes an argument, wisdom cannot be reduced to information, right? Because wisdom requires knowing what matters and why. And AI can simulate this function, right? AI can simulate, chatbots can answer questions. Generative models produce, contextual summaries. Recommendation systems suggest connections. So the interface looks like a knowledgeable guide, right? Conversational, responsive, confident. But users may not recognize the difference between pattern matching and understanding. And I suspect that many of our generation know this, but later generations may not know it, and they need to be taught the difference between pattern matching and pattern recognition and wisdom. So the invisible effect is not merely that users receive inferior guidance, that might not even be true, even though they may. It's that the capacity to recognize wisdom erodes, right? If the simulation is accepted as the real thing, users lose the ability to perceive what is missing, right? So they are trained by the environment to accept pattern-generated plausibility as understanding. And over time, the very concept of curatorial wisdom, right, hard-won, embodied, irreducible to algorithms, becomes difficult to articulate because the environment doesn't have a place for it. So experiments with generative AI reveal the depths of this problem, and I'll draw from this one example, again from Foka and Griffin's analysis. And what they discuss is when researchers ask DALL-E to create an archaic Greek Koros statue, and you can see that down in the lower left, the actual in the lower left. The results included a female figure and a warrior wearing a Corinthian helmet, characteristic of classical warriors, which was entirely wrong for the archaic period. The incorrect figure would be on the right. Foka and Griffin note the postures, the formal features, and even gender are entirely off. None of these images correspond to the image or style of an authentic Koros. Okay, that's the DALL-E on the left figure, the DALL-E created figure. Similarly, when asked for a German medieval map with Jerusalem at its center, the AI produced results that failed to capture authentic medieval cartographic conventions. They note that a novice user with little knowledge of what a Koros actually looks like might create something completely inappropriate, and they wouldn't know it. So the simulation presents itself with confidence, right? The user lacks the formation, however, to recognize the gap between plausibility and accuracy. And yes, we can say these programs will improve, but there's always going to be new information that isn't included. And that's why we need the embodied expertise there in the room to mediate. So the archaic chorus follows the strict conventions developed over a century, the one on the left. The rigid frontal stance, the left foot forward, arms pressed to the sides, the fists clench, the distinctive archaic smile, highly stylized, and the geometric anatomy. So these aren't arbitrary choices. They reflect Egyptian influence. They reflect evolving Greek naturalism and specific funerary or votive functions. But when researchers asked DALL-E to generate the archaic Greek chorus, the result looked superficially classical but violated nearly every convention. That's the one on the right, the lower right. The contrapposto poses borrowed from later periods, the relaxed arms, naturalistic musculature, and sometimes they added female elements to the figure as well, right? So what happens here is the AI produces something plausible to the untrained eye, but historically incoherent, right? So this is the problem of plausibility. The simulation presents itself with confidence. A novice user, charmed by the aesthetic, might use the AI for teaching or even publication, and wouldn't know that they had gotten it wrong. So the gap between plausibility and accuracy requires exactly the kind of formation that AI-mediated access tends to bypass. Finally, I'd like to talk about the disembodiment of heritage. So heritage is, at root, a connection across time, right? It links present communities to ancestors, to places, to traditions that extend beyond individual memory. And this connection has always been embodied. You visit the homeland, right? You touch the heirloom. You stand where your forebears stood. The body's presence in place is not incidental to heritage. It's how heritage becomes real, how it forms identity and community. And AI enables access without presence, right? The screen becomes the site of the encounter. I can visit the archive. I can explore the museum. I can experience the historic site without leaving my chair. And I say those in quotes. Now, this is not nothing. This is very important. And sometimes it's the only access possible. But notice what the environment assumes. That heritage is information to be transmitted rather than relationship to be inhabited. And the user receives content about the past. Whether the user is connected to the past, right? Whether heritage is being transmitted or merely displayed is a question the environment can't ask. So cultural heritage institutions have always been in the business of formation, not just information, is the thing I'm asking you to not forget. They have shaped how communities understand themselves, how individuals locate themselves in time, how the past remains present. And when AI mediates the encounter, the formation may be happening elsewhere in the design of the interface, in the logic of the algorithm, in the assumptions embedded in the training data. So the user is still being formed, but by what and toward what has become invisible, right? Yet, institutions can resist this disembodiment through deliberate design. And I want to give you just one example that I know of. In March 2025, the Resilience Research Infrastructure for Religious Studies in Italy convened scholars, heritage professionals, and educators in Rome for a training program titled Religion for Senses: How to Read, Treat, and Hear Religious Sources. So the program deliberately privileged embodied encounter. At the Campo San Teutonico within Vatican City, participants engaged with tombstones, with epitaphs, with religious iconography as theological and cultural texts, ones that must be, quote, read through the senses and interpreted with care. So trainers with resilience presented sacred art and funerary monuments not as historical data to be retrieved, but as didactic media, rich in meaning that emerges through presence. So a session on liturgical music, for example, focused on the loud tradition, which is popular devotional songs sung in confraternities and civic processions. And while the session presented a digital platform for encoding and analyzing these musical scores, the training itself required physical presence. Participants listened together in sacred space, experiencing what AI systems cannot encode. The resonance of sound in a particular place, the embodied knowledge of collective vocalization, the formation that happens when communities sing together. And as the trainers emphasized, addressing increasing religious literacy requires not only scholarly expertise, but pedagogical sensitivity, the kind of formation that happens through presence rather than retrieval. So the program really demonstrates that digital tools and embodied practice need not be mutually exclusive, but that institutions must deliberately design for formation, not only access. So a way forward, and I have some practical recommendations here for seeing what's around us. McLuhan's insight was that we perceive previous environments clearly only after newer environments have displaced them. We understood radio only after television. We began to see television's effects only as digital media rendered it obsolete. So the task for cultural heritage professionals is to perceive the AI environment now, right? Preserve friction deliberately, protect embodied encounter, make the invisible visible, and invest in human wisdom. And this doesn't, mean rejecting AI. The practical benefits are too significant, of course. So the European Parliament's research service acknowledges that AI offers these genuine opportunities for archival cataloging, information management, enhanced by AI, AI-assisted audience engagement, museums tracking attendance, forecasting needs, analyzing feedback. The Europeana platform is building a common European data space for cultural heritage, for example. None of this should be dismissed. But the same policy briefing that I'm drawing from here notes that museums and cultural heritage institutions have more than just economic importance. They're an identity factor and a contributor to social cohesion and stability. And UNESCO defines cultural heritage not merely as economic assets, but as the legacy maintained in the present and bestowed for the benefit of future generations. So this transmission across time is precisely what embodied encounter accomplishes and what retrieval systems cannot guarantee. So practically, this may mean deliberately preserving friction where AI might eliminate it. It may mean insisting on presence when screens offer convenience. It may mean, training users to recognize the difference between retrieval and encounter, between information and formation, between pattern matching and wisdom. It may mean asking what is not being surfaced, what communities are not being served, and what heritage is becoming structurally invisible. So we might add, institutions must also implement formation protection techniques, deliberate practices that preserve embodied encounter, formative friction, and the wisdom transmissions that AI systems cannot. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So much. Yeah, sure. I already mobilizing, but first of all, I would like to thank you so much. I always say that the very successful webinar that raising question more than answering questions, and that's what you did in this one. And for sure, you give us what we can call it a golden gate to look at the AI with a different perspective and from different angle as well. Not just it's not just a tool, but also it's a way to facilitate and make the cultural environment more accessible, more reachable for the audience. So thank you about this. Now I will give a few minutes for Dr. Sue to give a reflection on the what you just presented. till I just also collect more questions from our attendees. Please, Dr. Su, go ahead and give us what tickling in your mind after this presentation from Maria. Yes, Su.
Thank you. And thank you, Maria, for a wonderful presentation. I think people talk a lot about AI and how this can be used and implemented in different practices, but I think what you presented was well framed in terms of looking at not just the benefits of using them, but the other side of it. And also, I like that you also consider the longer term perspectives in terms of how this can impact the profession. Looking back, some of the activities that has happened so far, some of the examples you shared were obviously, you know, concerns of our profession. And I don't know if we have a good solution for that yet, but it's important to be aware of what are concerning with the adoption of AI technology. And I think I agree with Professor Metalopoli that, you know, you gave a lot of questions that we as information professionals need to keep, you know, considering and exploring. So thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, Sue, for this one. And for sure, I think AI become a fact. We can't ignore it, especially that I can find some of attendees use the AI as an AI agent, and it helps us, like Ms. Jumana just use AI just to attend and record and analyze this webinar, which is before AI was something like a dream or something in a fantasy. So now it helps. But the most important thing that the outcome of the AI agent is how we can use this one to elaborate more our thoughts and have more ideas. Okay, let's jump directly to a question that we received. I try to classify it in a way that merging the similar with the concept. Let's start with the first one. It's when you say AI is an environmental change rather than a tool, how should cultural institutions rethink about that in a responsible and accountable way? I think he's starting with the last thing that you started with. Please, Maria, and for sure, any comment or any reflection with you, Sue, can be added. So the question, as I said before, when you say that AI is an environmental change rather than a tool, how should cultural institutions rethink about that in a responsible and accountable way?
Yes, so I'm really drawing on the work of Marshall McLuhan, a media ecologist from the 20th century. He's been built on by people like Lance Straight. And the argument is that as we move from one form of media to another, we often ignore the older environment. And so the idea in cultural heritage institutions, to cut to this, would be as we adapt technologies, as we use something like Transcribus to translate documents for us, especially handwritten documents, just pay attention to what you're not doing anymore, because what you're not doing anymore may have its own information. And so what I like to do in my classroom when I teach is I teach very experientially. I like to bring my students to the institutions that we're studying. And I would say preserve the experiential aspect of whatever cultural heritage institution that you're managing. And don't lose that in favor of, okay, we're going to put everything online and maybe not invite people in as often. So I would say you can balance it. You could do the two together, like the resilience program in Rome did. Have people listen to music, go and sit in sacred spaces, but also use the digital tools to enhance the experience.
Great, thank you. So you need to give more elaboration or anything?
Yeah, I agree with what Dr. Mazzenga mentioned, but you know, it's also I kind of consider the AI technology as an addition of the tools that we have, and if you look at it, I mean, the way that the technology works is amazing. But if you just look at it as another tool to adopt for us to do what we want to deliver and what users can use, you can maybe take another perspective on it, because it can maybe be a good substitute of something that we've been doing, but then it's not doing everything what we do, and you just kind of have to understand what AI can do, and what it cannot do. And I think Dr. Mazzenga's presentation kind of laid out pretty well in terms of what it can do well and what it cannot. And I guess identifying that for us is important so that we can make most use of what it can offer and not just be taken over on the technology in terms of what we value as profession. So.
Can I add to that? Can I add one
Yeah,
more point? So when I was preparing this paper for this webinar, the studies that I found studying how AI is used and its effects on cultural heritage were all European. I actually mostly study U.S. cultural heritage. I do some work in Europe too, but what I found is I couldn't find any studies that are U.S.-based policy papers comparing how AI was used across institutions. So my point is that we need to study it. There need to be studies of how AI is affecting populations, what might be being lost in transitioning to AI to create finding aids or digital collections, those sorts of things. So I would also add, preserve friction, but also let's have a few more studies on the effects of AI among information professionals such as ourselves.
Perfect. Maybe I hypothesize that because in Europe there is a huge number of monuments and some sort of museum. So this is a good piece of art or pieces of art that could be under examined or something like that. Could be, but I think still in the state there is a many of these special that is open museum that we can say. The next question is about the invisibility, because I think that the term you raised is a little bit need to revisit from time to time with the way that you deliver to us. The question is, what makes AI invisible in heritage context compared to earlier technologies like digitization, for example? I like this question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And one thing I struggled to do in this paper was, of course, AI is an extension of digitization, right? So digitization began happening a couple of decades ago. And AI is now taking digitization to the next level. That's it. So that's I agree with that. The basis of that question, which is that digitization is not separate from AI. It's actually, AI is an extension of it. And so if I were going to redo this, I didn't have an hour to talk about that, but if I were going to elaborate a little bit further, I would actually do more a longitudinal focus and talk about how digitization itself has some of the same effects that AI does.
Perfect. I'm just confirming that will not take more than 5 to 10 minutes just for the question, because I know that your time is a little bit tight somehow, so we'll keep it. There is a question related to the expression aura that you read as well. So this question is about, could you please explain more about the concept of aura for artwork and its relationship to AI?
Yes. So I would go to Walter Benjamin, his work. You can look him up. He's pretty famous in our field. He wrote an essay on what happens when you reproduce art pieces in the 1930s. And there's no, that's not that unusual because you have the rise of not just photography, which came earlier, but film. So he focuses on the aura of objects and examines philosophically the aura of objects, and that the presence of the object has an aura to it that you cannot capture in any reproduction. And I'm happy to, it's an essay. I have it like right next to me somewhere. I'm happy to give you the reference to the essay, but he's the one that really elaborates on that in a really great way.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next question is for both of you, Maria and Sue. What ethical red lines should cultural institutions draw when adopting AI tools? From your point of view, I think there is some tips or some points that you need to share it with us, Maria and Sue.
Soo-Yeon, do you want to, or should I, or?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the ethical perspective, the most concerning part is hallucination. The example Maria shared with the Dali production of the sculpture, AI can make anything look weird and when it's not actually the truth. So whether it's an object or information, that's something that you need to be cautious about, especially when users are trying to discover some information based on it, have some experience based on it. This can, if you consider this in a longer term perspective, this is really concerning part, I think. And so in terms of the practice, there has been a lot of discussion on how do we train users, how do we train ourselves in terms of using AI ethically. I've been looking at some of the cultural heritage implementation of AI, and some of the cases they mix up some of the cultural background into one artifact they generate, and those are a little bit concerning in the way that we deal with cultural heritage. So I think the first thing is getting the awareness delivered widely for any users of AI, and then particularly for people who are working in cultural heritage to be more cautious in terms of checking the factual background of any adoption of AI.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Maria?
Yes,
Thank
I would add the studies that I looked at emphasize the role of human experts to be able to check data. We could ironically have a new rise of subject specialists in archives and information science, because we've been kind of moving away from subject experts toward information specialists. But we need subject specialists, right? The other thing is that I think there has to be something, some kind of transparency related to training data. And we don't have transparency with training data right now. So if we know what data was used to train the various AI tools that we're using, we'll have a good idea of how to address any potential issues with the use of that tool.
Perfect. Short answer, but very concentrated. Thank you so much. Once we talk about the human factor, so we have many questions, but I try to merge them and rephrase it. In AI era, what specific human skills should heritage professionals strengthen? And the other question, which is related very closely to that, how should education and training for future heritage professionals change in response to AI? Okay, Maria?
Yeah. So what I do with my students is I talk to them about having people skills and engagement skills, and actually going out and working with objects. That's one way, is that they actually know how to engage different populations. And to me, that's preserving friction in the pedagogical sense. But I also have them go and explore different tools. Like I did an exercise with my students. I have a course called Foundations of Digital Libraries, and I had them go create metadata using an LLM. And then they had to assess where the problems were with the metadata as they looked at the document that metadata was created for. So force them to use it and evaluate the uses of the tools. So I think it's a constant self-reflection back on the uses of the tools. So preserve friction by having them go out among the objects and present materials and create exhibits, their own exhibits, and also use AI tools to work with cultural heritage objects and create assignments and assessments about whether they're working skillfully or not and where they're weak.
Mhm. Perfect. Sue, you need to elaborate more. Need to add something?
Yeah, I totally agree about the assessment part. Not every AI tools are created in the same way, or not every AI tools are created for the same purposes. So it's important to understand the way that it functions and how it's originally designed, and you kind of have to assess them carefully to make sure that you use them properly for your own purpose. And that is something that as a user of AI tools, you need to have a good understanding of. Another part that I was thinking is that you also need to understand how you can communicate efficiently with AI. And that's part of it is kind of training it in a way that you want. I've talked with one of the classic language professor before, and she was like, I cannot let our students use AI because the AI is not trained with like classic languages. So another thing is like how well trained a tool, an AI tool can be with types of cultural heritage collection you're dealing with. And that's something that you might want to have some understanding of. And potentially if there is a way of making AI trained in that aspect, maybe that's something that you can also contribute advancing the AI technology for cultural heritage discipline.
Yeah, for sure. And for sure, the environment, or what we call it, the vibe that you train the AI tool within it also affect about the outcome that you will get from it. So because of the time, I will read the last question, which is a little bit philosophical and practical as well. It's about how do we avoid becoming technologically dependent while still benefiting from AI?
How do we avoid becoming dependent?
Technologically dependent, and at the same time, that trying to benefit from AI.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I've been, kind of talking about here is preserve some of the old functions that we have in our cultural heritage institutions.
Okay.
Do research on actual objects, visit cultural heritage institutions, but also learn how these amazing technologies can enhance understanding of those objects and those institutions.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a little bit difficult, when you see this amazing technology coming out, and
the big
then
wave.
you intend to just follow what's going on, and that's what exactly happened when the ChatGPT was released. Everyone started using it, got fascinated about the tool itself, with all the the graphics, images, non-texture elements that it can generate and work with. I think it's a fascinating tool for anyone who's working in the cultural heritage, but you also have to understand what is the core of your profession, and is this tool just for generating things that looks nice and cool, or does it actually do some of the work that we value as a core value of the profession? I think that's the distinction you need to make when you use these tools.
Yeah, and if I can add it in this context, I think the human creativity is the golden gate for something like that. The more that you focus on your creativity, using the AI for the routine or the things that facilitate this one, so you will have more opportunity to create something unusual or away of this one. So I would like to thank you so much, Maria, and Sue as well, and all this wave or flow of hearts and thumb up is a very tangible and visual response from our attendees about how we succeeded to deliver the message, mainly Maria, and also raising questions that I think everyone will take it with him when he just left this webinar. So I'm really appreciate this one, and for sure that we'll be looking forward to seeing you again in another webinar with other way, and I will leave the last word for both of you as our honorable guest and speaker. I'll start with Maria, please.
Well, thank you for having me. I hadn't, this topic just came up when I started thinking about it.
Okay.
As a result of you requesting me to do the presentation, and I learned a lot just doing the research, and I'm really glad to have shared it with all of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for, yes, Sue, please.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed hearing Maria's presentation, but I also enjoyed a lot with all the questions. These are really great questions and made me think a little bit further on the topic too. So thank you everyone for the great discussion.
Thank you both, and thank you for our attendees, and looking forward to seeing them in the upcoming webinar from Naseej Academy. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.